to congratulate everybody. I really believe the Taliban wants to do something to show that we're not all wasting time. If bad things happen, we'll go back. I let the people know we'll go back, and we'll go back so fast, and we'll go back with a force like nobody's ever seen. And I don't think that will be necessary. I hope it's not necessary. And so I just wanted to bring that up before we begin on a topic that has become very, very important to everybody. First of all, the amount of work that these professionals behind me and many other professionals in many rooms behind us who are watching right now, I don't have the room here to bring them all in, but they have been working round the clock so hard on the coronavirus. It's a tough one, but a lot of progress has been made. I want to provide an update to our people, to our citizens, to the world, frankly, on our action to address the coronavirus and those that have been hurt badly by it. At this moment, we have 22 patients in the United States currently that have coronavirus. Unfortunately, one person passed away overnight. She was a wonderful woman, a medically high-risk patient in her late 50s. 4 others are very ill. Thankfully, 15 are either recovered fully or they're well on their way to recovery. And in all cases, they've been let go in their home. Additional cases in the United States are likely, but healthy individuals should be able to fully recover. And we think that will be a statement that we can make with great surety now that we've gotten familiar with this problem. They should be able to recover should they contract the virus. So healthy people, if you're healthy, you will probably go through a process and you'll be fine. Since the early stages of the foreign outbreak, my administration has taken the most aggressive action in modern history to confront the spread of this disease. We moved very early. That was one of the decisions we made that really turned out to be a lifesaver in a sense, big lifesaver. On January 31st, I imposed travel restrictions on foreign nations who had, and anybody that had been to China or people coming out of China. And I want to say that China seems to be making tremendous progress. Their numbers are way down, and if you read Tim Cook of Apple said that they're now in full operation again in China. Their numbers are way down. Experts now agree that the decision to move so quickly, despite a lot of opposition on that decision, was a wise one. It greatly slowed the spread of the virus to the United States, and it really gave us time to do some of the critical moves that we've done. And it allowed these great professionals to get together and figure it all out. And we think they've done that. We've taken the most aggressive actions to confront the coronavirus. They are the most aggressive taken by any country. And we're the #1 travel destination anywhere in the world, yet we have far fewer cases of the disease than even countries with much less travel or a much smaller population. As an important part of our efforts, on Monday I'll be meeting with the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, actually. They'll be coming to the White House, and we're talking about a vaccine and developing very quickly, and they've already started working on it, developing very rapidly a vaccine for the virus, to combat the virus. And we're having very good initial feedback. But these companies will be coming to the White House on Monday. Tremendous amounts of supplies are already on hand. We have 43 million masks, just far more than anyone would have assumed we could have had so quickly. And a lot more are coming. Today, the White House Coronavirus Task Force, led by Vice President Mike Pence, they met for 2.5 hours. I spent a lot of that time with them also, and we came up with some ideas, recommendations, and frankly some pretty strict edicts that we're going to be going by, and Mike's going to be discussing that. But we are really having a group of people that is so talented, and they're working round the clock. And for that reason, I really would wish that we could report exactly what's happened, how well we're doing under quite adverse circumstances. But we're doing really well, very, very professionally handled. Our country is prepared for any circumstance. We hope it's not going to be a major circumstance. It'll be a smaller circumstance, but whatever the circumstance is, we're prepared. And I'd like to just ask and caution that the media, we would respectfully ask the media and politicians and everybody else involved not do anything to incite a panic, because there's no reason to panic at all. This is something that is being handled professionally. I also want to thank, by the way, governors and representatives of our various states, in some cases some more than others, because they've really been working very hard in areas where we've seen indication of the virus. But I want to thank the governors and all of the representatives from all of our states, the rooms they've made available, the speed with which they've worked has really been incredible. So again, thank you to everybody. I'm going to ask Mike Pence now to discuss a little bit about travel, and we have some restrictions on some travel from other countries that are having a hard time, and I want to thank everybody. We'll take some questions as soon as we're finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me begin, as the President did, by expressing our deepest condolences to the family of the woman in Washington State who's lost her life to the coronavirus. I want to assure that family that they're on the hearts of every American and those that are continuing to struggle. In some cases, in ICU units, can be assured of the prayers of millions of Americans.
Absolutely.
From the moment that this country learned of the spread of the coronavirus, President Donald Trump took decisive action, established the White House Coronavirus Task Force, and as the President just described, the President took unprecedented action to suspend all travel into the United States from China. It simply had never been done before by any previous administration. It is among the reasons why the threat to Americans of coronavirus remains low, despite today's tragic news from Washington State. The task force met this morning and brought the President a range of options, and at his direction, we will be doing the following. First, the President authorized action today to add additional travel restrictions on Iran. We will be using Section 212F, banning travel from Iran. Iran is also already under a travel ban, but we are expanding existing travel restrictions to include any foreign national who has visited Iran within the last 14 days. In addition to moving Iran, we are going to increase to the highest level of advisory, which is level 4, advising Americans do not travel to specific regions in Italy and South Korea. Let me say again, the President today has authorized the State Department to increase the travel advisory for Americans to level 4. We are urging Americans to not travel to the areas in Italy and the areas in South Korea that are most affected by the coronavirus. The President's also directed the State Department to work with our allies in Italy and in South Korea to coordinate a medical screening in their countries of any individuals that are coming in to the United States of America. And we look forward to working with them in a collaborative and a cooperative way. Now, with regard to the task force, I'm just a few days into this job, but I can tell you, having spent time with these extraordinary professionals that the President just alluded to, having spoken directly to more than a dozen governors, including Governor Jay Inslee this morning in Washington State, I think every American would be proud to know what I've heard about the work of HHS, the work of CDC, the work of all of our agencies. At the President's direction, this team has been working seamlessly with health officials at the state and local level. And I can assure the American public that we will continue to live out the President's admonition a few days ago that we're all in this together. And as we work with members of Congress, I've had the opportunity to speak with Republican and Democrat leadership in the Congress. We'll be working very closely on a supplemental funding bill to make sure that not only do all these agencies have the resources that they require, but we'll also make sure that state and local health officials have the resources and the reimbursement to take such actions that are necessary to protect the health of the American people. The President mentioned masks. This morning we talked a great deal about additional medical supplies. Let me be very clear, and I'm sure the physicians who are up here will reflect this as well. The average American does not need to go out and buy a mask. But this administration is going to always put first our patients first, and second, we're going to make sure and protect the health of our healthcare providers. As the President said, we have more than 40 million masks available today. We've contracted now with 3M to 35 million more masks per month will be produced, and we're also going to be working with other manufacturers. In addition to that, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response will be announcing today courses of action to increase the availability of masks, as well as prioritizing availability to high-risk healthcare workers, modifying guidance, and developing a whole-of-nations communications plan. The President wants us to be certain that our healthcare providers have the support they need to do their job and to do their job safely. With that, I'm going to yield the podium to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and then we'll hear from some of our medical experts. But let me assure every American, at President Trump's direction, this is an all-hands-on-deck effort. While the risk to Americans remain low, the President's actions today with regard to Iran, with regard to Italy and with South Korea, and with regard to making medical supplies more available, I hope gives evidence to the fact that at his direction, we're going to continue to lean into this effort and put the health and safety of the American people first. Mr. Secretary?
I'm going to weigh in real quick on what they just said, in and with a question. If that be the case, how come the President used the Democrats towards politicizing this particular crisis, this healthcare crisis, in referring to another hoax? How come he used that in the expression towards another hoax to the Democrats? It is no hoax. There is no hoax pertaining to this disease. Whenever you see the end results of death and despair on national TV, and you see everybody and their brother with a flood of data, a flood of information, and just almost every one of them overseas has been wearing a mask, or thinking about wearing a mask, or they're out of mask. And some of them has actually had riots of fighting for masks. Whenever you see this on TV, it infiltrates your mind, and it plants a seed of crucial imperableness as far as it being evident that we need to basically reconform, I guess would be the right word. Utilize would be another word. Mobilize would be another good word. There's no doubt what the president done towards putting out these flight bans help to slow down the virus. But to even come close of characterizing that this virus is some sort of a hoax, regardless whether you're using it in a metaphorical way, pointing your finger at the Democrats, that this is just another hoax. That can be taken out of context to the point of people actually thinking that the president thinks that the virus itself is a hoax. I don't know if you got that or not, but I listened to the speech of what he said yesterday in blaming the Democrats for another hoax. And I also heard his son get on national TV and say how that this puts this into another category of being sick towards blaming the president of this virus, in which I kind of agree with that statement, that nobody should say that it's because of the president the reason why that the virus ever exists to begin with. It's not because of the president. It's because of biological evolving germs that are evolving and rotating and getting stronger and longer. I mean, the Bible predicts these things that are going to occur in the last days. Matter of fact, they was occurring even during the time whenever Jesus was on the planet, pertaining to leprosy. So diseases has not been a new thing for the world. This isn't something new. But the president needs to be very, very cautious in how that he presents his words towards using it as a hoax. It's one thing to use the word hoax in a Russian investigation. It's one thing to use the word hoax in the Ukrainian ordeal. But what's going on right now with people's lives pertaining to death and the mortality rate of people dying should not even be close of relating around a hoax. And if it is, he needs to be very, very clear in how that he's stating it in the regards towards people misunderstanding what he's trying to get his point to the viewing audience, which is us, which is me. He needs to be very, very clear, because this is sensitive. This is crucial. This is imperative. This is the reason why that we have upper levels of government that we hire and pay them the money that we pay them to begin with. Let's listen to some more of this. And I realize we are in uncharted territory. And I realize that it is a tight line walk. It's a balancing act towards becoming concerned versus becoming overly concerned. And the president, a while ago, validated that by making the comment that he would appreciate if the media did not overemphasize towards starting a panic like we have seen on national TV that has occurred in other parts of the country. Other parts of the world. Not the country, but other parts of the world. That could actually escalate into it doing right here. Whenever you're talking about people, lives at stake, whenever you're talking about medicine not getting to pharmaceutical communities properly, you're talking about upsetting the apple cart. And you're talking about upsetting the apple cart in a big, big way. Matter of fact, we should have never, ever allowed ourselves to become so vulnerable. This is my opinion now, and it's not costing you nothing to hear it, providing that you are. But we should have never, ever allowed ourselves to become so vulnerable to the degree that we are solely dependent upon a particular country like China, which is a communist known country, of supplying over 90% of our medication and our medical needs over here in America. You talk about a breach of security. If we was to ever have a big disagreement or a war with China, we would be cutting our own nose off to spite our faces. We would be shooting ourselves in the foot, basically, because we have become solely so dependent upon China to properly sustain our medication. Once more, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And if you have a weak link, you need to focus upon that weak link. Especially whenever it comes to one country challenging another country to the degree of holding us hostage. Holding us hostage pertaining to people's medical problems here in America. We don't need a country holding us hostage, which is the next thing, or maybe even worse than holding a gun to our heads, towards saying, you're going to do what we tell you to do, or we're going to cut off all your medical supplies. Who allowed for this to have ever gotten to this extent to begin with? That's the $64,000 question. And I'm sure it wasn't this administration, because something like this has occurred throughout a period of time. Kind of like the majority of everything that gets sold in Walmarts around the country. Probably over 65 to 70% is made from other parts of the world. Now, during the time whenever Sam Walton was alive and running Walmart, you didn't see this type of behavior. But then whenever Mr. Senior Bush, W.H. Bush, made it formal that Walmart was an outstanding player in America's society, and that he was going to deem them as being number one retailer in the country. Number one. Above and beyond Kmart, Big K, and all the other manufacturers out there. Whenever he done that, that opened up a brand new venue for Walmart in getting the big head towards thinking, oh, wow, so that means we can go over here and get the cheapest product, and we can go over here, and we can play this cutthroat type game, even though we're cutting our own country's throat towards hardware stores, manufacturer stores, people that make TVs, people that make shoes, people that make shirts. You know, a lot of our commercialized industrial factories has shut down simply because of solely relying upon other countries that claim that they can make it, ship it, and bring it here cheaper than we can even make it. Cheaper than we can make it. You know why? Because the cart got in front of the horse pertaining to the global market and pertaining to the NAFTA free trade deal. And while the Clintons, I hate to point my finger at the Clintons, but here you go again, pointing a finger, you may be saying, but if the Clintons would have worked out some sort of a better agreement with NAFTA of the free trade agreement, they would have put in their policies that not only is it a free trade agreement, but it's a fair trade agreement. No one never thought that. Gee, I wonder why. All the jobs has gone south, and we've got all these factories, all these empty buildings now that's inundated the country like tombstones that's sitting idle, that used to be a thriving, productive society. So whenever the President of the United States of America gets on national TV and gets to talking about a hoax, he needs to be very clear in the way that he is positioning his conversation, because it can be misinterpreted, it can be misconstrued, it can be taken out of context, to the point of people thinking that we have a president that thinks that coronavirus does not even exist. And don't worry about masks. Don't worry about the problems that you're seeing on TV, because all this stuff is just a big hoax. No. We was born at night, but it wasn't last night, Mr. President. We understand the severity of what we've been watching now for the past 2 or 3 weeks. Some of us even a little bit longer than that, that's been on top of this, that's really paid close attention whenever they started using the word outbreak. That word outbreak should immediately concern every individual here in the United States towards a biological, chemical agency that could possibly bring destruction to our society. And not just this society, but societies all over the world. Cultures all over the world. This is something that the United States military has formally always been deeply concerned about. Biological, chemical warfare. And I'm not saying that this got spread intentionally, and I'm not saying that we're involved in some sort of a chemical, biological war right now pertaining to diseases. I hope to God that not be the case. But I'm just saying that that has always been a major number one concern, even above and beyond nuclear, because to invent something that's microscopic to the human eye to the point that you can't see it, can't taste it, can't hear it, but you know it's there, that actually becomes more lethal than a nuclear bomb. Because if you send out a nuclear bomb, odds are somebody's going to notice it. If it hits the ground and blows up, odds are somebody's going to see it, feel it, and know that it went off because of the vibes that it puts out, plus the nuclear activity that it puts out. So in actuality, a microscopic virus, a germ, can be as lethal or more lethal than a nuclear bomb. And the United States military knows this. And other militaries throughout the world knows this too as well. That's the reason why this should be looked upon with the highest attention towards what has went on and what is going on over in China. And there's no doubt that the leader of China is going to tell our leader over here in America, oh, we've got it all under control. It's doing just fine. We've opened up this. We've opened up that. Everybody's hunky-dory. That is as far from the truth as you can ever think of towards everything becoming normal. We know for a fact by listening to social media. Keep in mind, we got social media at play here. We're not just dealing with major media entities that can lie to us. Now we have social medias that can tell us what is actually occurring on ships, on boats, in factories, what's closed, what isn't closed, who's shutting down, who's boycotting who's being under watch. We've got all these eyes and ears and devices that now tell the truth about what's actually occurring. So it's much, 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 much more difficult for a country, even the size of China, to be manipulative in its information that it's broadcasting out to the rest of the world. and that includes anywhere, because you got those little handheld devices now everywhere pertaining to social media. Something that they didn't have 25, 30 years ago. Not like they have today. Not as predominant and as easy access as what the people have today. Well, so let's listen to the rest of this, because it is crucial.
Let me begin by, on behalf of all of the officials at HHS and our whole teams, expressing our sadness for the loss of this patient in the state of Washington. Any single death for us is a real tragedy, and our sympathy to her family and our solidarity with all those who are and will suffer from the novel coronavirus. From day one, this is what we predicted. This is what we expected. The risk to any average American is low from the novel coronavirus. The risk remains low thanks to the unprecedented actions President Trump has taken and the actions he's announcing today. That risk remains low. But this can change rapidly. We have always said, from the first moment that we have spoken about this, that we would see more cases. We are seeing more cases. We will see more cases. But it's important to remember, for the vast majority of individuals who contract the novel coronavirus, they will experience mild to moderate symptoms, and their treatment will be to remain at home, treating their symptoms the way they would a severe cold or the flu. For some individuals, a smaller percentage, especially those who may be medically fragile, they will require medical attention, including possibly hospitalization. Our basic message in terms of the containment of this disease and the measures that we have and are taken and are today announcing is we want to lower the amount of travel to and from the most impacted areas. This is a basic containment strategy. That is the philosophy behind the moves that we have taken, the moves we're announcing today, and any moves that we will consider in the future. With that said, let me turn things over to Dr. Tony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease at NIH. Thank you very much. Dr. Fauci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I want to first again, as the entire team feels, to extend our sympathies to the family of the individual who expired as a result of this particular virus and this particular disease. But I also want to underscore and emphasize the points that the Secretary made about what is evolving here. You've heard of the terminology community spread. Well, community spread is when you have infection in the community in which you don't have a direct link to a known index case. That really challenges us with something that we need to do and that we do very well. The state and local health authorities, in collaboration with the CDC, would need to identify, isolate, and contact trace. And that's what's going on right here in the country. With regard to the particular area that's involved now in Washington, the country as a whole, because we get asked that all the time, still remains at low risk. But when we say that, we want to underscore that this is an evolving situation. And in real time, we will keep you appraised of what is going on just the same way as we are doing it today. So how do you address this new challenge? There's what we do from within and what we do from without. I hearken back to the original decision that was made by the president of making sure that we knew the scenario that was going on in China. We prevented travel from China to the United States. If we had not done that, we would have had many, many more cases right here that we would have to be dealing with. So in that spirit, the approach is going to be, as we address this challenge, which is going to evolve by the day and by the week, to do what was just mentioned, to try and keep our citizens from going to places that are active infection and to prevent places where there are active infection to necessarily easily get here. That's the getting it from without to within. from within, we will very aggressively do the kind of public health measures that would hopefully contain this. But as we say this, we need to prepare for further challenges, and we will have them. You will hear about additional cases that will be coming on. You should not be surprised by that, but to realize that that is something that is anticipated when you get community spread. So when you have cases throughout the world, the way we're seeing now, South Korea, Italy, Iran, and places like that, the United States cannot be completely immune to that. The challenge is how we deal with it. And I can assure you all the resources that are necessary are going to be put into dealing with what we see evolving right now. And again, we'd be happy to answer any questions later, but Bob, do you want to say a few words?
I also want to add my prayers and sympathies for those that are sick and obviously our citizen that unfortunately died last night. Currently, as said, there's 22 cases in the United States, and these initial cases were really linked to travel to China and their contacts. Recently, as was stated, we've confirmed new cases with no link to travel history or contacts, and health departments under the leadership of the states and local health departments supported by CDC are aggressively evaluating these cases in California, Oregon, and Washington. As was said,
how come the president and his team is asphyxiated on a number of 22 cases, but yet now when we listen to the media, we hear that it's over 60 cases? That is a conflict of interest that causes concern about somebody not telling the whole truth in regards to the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help us God. Whenever you have two different entities that's giving out two different specific numbers, it becomes demoralizing and not knowing who to trust. It is. It's demoralizing because it's like, well, which one do we believe? Do we believe the president's team, or do we believe other experts that get on TV, national TV, and exploit other facts about other places that has other cases? So, you know, it becomes confusing, it becomes demoralizing, it becomes disheartening of not knowing the severity of all this and who's actually telling the truth and who's not.
we should anticipate to see additional cases and clusters in the days ahead, and we will continue to aggressively evaluate them by the state and local and territorial tribal health departments in conjunction with CDC by embracing early case recognition, isolation, contact tracing, and begin to do that to limit the further spread. I want to also add my emphasis to what was said, that as we stand here today, the risk of the American public remains low. As was said, we should anticipate more cases, but again, the current risk to the American public remains low.
If I could just ask you said the other day in the cabinet room with African-American leaders, you've got to get away from politics. You were down in Charleston last night using the word hoax when talking about Democrats. Somebody now is dead from this. Do you regret that kind of talk?
No. Hoax referring to the action that they take to try and pin this on somebody because we've done such a good job. The hoax is on them. I'm not talking about what's happening here. I'm talking what they're doing. That's the hoax. That's just a continuation of the hoax, whether it's the impeachment hoax or the Russia hoax. This is what I'm talking about. Certainly not referring to this. How could anybody refer to this? This is very serious stuff. But the way they refer to it, because these people have done such an incredible job. And I don't like it when they are criticizing these people. And that's the hoax. That's what I'm talking about.
They're not criticizing these people. They're criticizing you because you used the word hoax in a sentence that gave the appearance that you was possibly indicating last night, while talking to South Carolinas, that this was a hoax. So you have reconfirmed and clarified today that you was not necessarily talking about the disease, but you was talking about the tactics that was being used, or the tactics that was being mobilized by the Democrat Party against you and against your party. This is the way that I'm understanding it now. But as of last night, as many people that I've heard talking on the news, it almost sounded as if you were saying, Mr. President, that this is a hoax. You need to be careful in how you express yourself. And very, very clear, because some of the wording that you can use can be taken out of context very, very quickly towards what you mean and what you say. Because what you say should be lining up with what you mean. Say what I mean what I say. We've heard that expression before. Say what I mean what I say. So, now you have clarified what you actually meant, but it has taken almost 24 hours to re-clarify what your intent was last night while speaking to a large audience.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm just going to ask you directly about this with regard to the flow of information. From the very beginning, you received a lot of criticism regarding that, in particular about Dr. Anthony Fauci. He is world-renowned in contagious diseases, and there were reports out there that he was being muzzled. Can you tell us that this widely respected expert, Dr. Fauci, will have every opportunity to tell us the truth?
Well, that's a very dishonest question, because he has had that ability to do virtually whatever he's wanted to do. And in fact, he was never muzzled.
Okay.
I think I can speak. You can speak. Why don't you speak to that? Very dishonest question, but that's okay.
It's not dishonest. I want to clarify, Mr. President. I want to clarify.
So let me clarify it. I have never been muzzled, ever, and I've been doing this since the administration of Ronald Reagan.
You should never gag professionals in their opinion. You should never gag them, because that's the reason why they're considered professionals.
I'm not being muzzled by this administration. What happened, which was misinterpreted, is that we were set up to go on some shows. And when the vice president took over, we said, let's regroup and figure out how we're going to be communicating. So I had to just stand down on a couple of shows and resubmit for clearance. And when I resubmitted for clearance, I got cleared. So I have not been muzzled at all. That was a real misrepresentation of what happened.
Are you considering other travel restrictions? And yes. What about closing the southern border?
We are looking also southern border. In fact, some of the folks are here right now. Ken is here someplace. And yes, we are thinking about southern border. We have received a lot of power on the southern border over the last couple of years from the courts, but we are looking at that very strongly.
Mr. President, how should Americans prepare for this virus? Should they go on with their daily lives, change their routine? What should they do?
Well, I hope they don't change their routine, but maybe, Anthony, I'll let you answer that, or Bob, do you want to answer that?
Sure, Mr. President. Thank you. I think it's really important that, as I said, the risk at this time is low. The American public needs to go on with their normal lives, okay? We're continuing to aggressively investigate these new community links. We're going to continue to be transparent in relating that to the American public. But at this stage, again, the risk is low. We need to go on with our normal lives.
Mr. President, thank you very much.
much. Increasing of the coronavirus in South Korea, and to only about the U.S. troops in South Korea, and how did you consider that traffic in the U.S.?
Well, we care very much for the troops. We're in constant touch with the troops. We've been speaking to the general, as you probably know, 32,000 troops in South Korea. And that's all working out fine. And we're in touch. We were in touch with the authorities in South Korea too.
What responsibility do you feel, as you're communicating about this, for the public to follow your directions and to take the prudent steps? And then when you did use the word hoax, couldn't that cause some people to not take the precautionary steps because they're linking what you're saying when you use the word hoax in the context of coronavirus?
Okay, so again, the hoax was used with respect to Democrats and what they were saying. It was a hoax, what they were saying, and that was very clear if you'd read the words, and I think you know that too. As far as what responsibility, my great responsibility, I think the biggest decision we made was going very early, and that was a decision made against a lot of people that thought we shouldn't do that. That's why we're at 22 instead of a much higher number. It would have been a much higher number. That was a big decision. It was a hard decision because it had never been done before anyway. I mean, not even early or late. It had never been made a decision like that. So that was big. And my next thing is really getting the best people. We're the best people in the world. They're standing behind me. These people are so talented. I've seen them in action now for a number of weeks, actually, but in particular for the last 4 or 5 days. And I want to thank Mike Pence and everybody for the job they're doing. We have a great team. We have great people. And this too will end.
Are there
Go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Go. Do you want?
Mr.
Mr. President, you talked about people going about their routine. I did want to ask, though, with you and the Vice President, is the White House taking any extra precautions to make sure that you don't come in contact with the virus, either through your travel or with who you meet?
Well, I think so. I mean, we lead a life. I get around. I was in South Carolina last night. We had a tremendous rally. I've been around. I think we're going to be in very good shape. You know, you're talking about 22 people right now in this whole very vast country. So I think we'll be in very good shape.
If I may, a couple of questions for Dr. Fauci about some particulars about the virus. Dr. Fauci, what do you now understand about the morbidity? The Secretary refers to medically fragile people. Are you confident that if you're a relatively healthy young person, that this will not be fatal for you?
Okay. So the number in our country currently is low, but when you look at the pattern, it seems to be following the experiences that others have had. It's never 100%. If you look at the totality of the cases that have been reported, particularly from China, about 75 to 80% of them would do really quite well. They would just sort of like a bad flu or a cold. You get anywhere from 15 to 20 somewhat percent who are going to go on to require advanced medical care, hospitalization, possibly intensive care. For the most part, the people who get in trouble and ultimately, tragically, would die from this are people who are elderly and or have underlying conditions, heart disease, chronic lung disease, diabetes, obesity because of the difficulty in breathing back and forth. However, every once in a while, you're going to see a one-off. You're going to see a 25-year-old person who looks otherwise well that's going to get seriously ill. But the vast majority of the people who get into trouble do have these underlying conditions. And that's why it confuses people, because they say, well, you just said that, and then there's a report of a 40-year-old physician from China who died. That's going to happen. That happens with influenza. Most of the time, influenza kills people who are advanced age and underlying conditions. But you hear in the media every once in a while, a college student would get infected and ultimately die. But the majority is in that risk group.
And one more technical question.
Yes.
Have you determined whether there are any variants of this virus so that a person who may have gotten it and then gotten over it could get it again?
Now, there's no indication that that's going on at all. If this virus acts like other viruses, which I have no reason to believe it won't, once you've gotten infected and recovered, you're not going to get infected with the same virus.
I want to ask you about the peace deal in Doha between the Taliban and the U.S. Does this mean the war in Afghanistan is over? Is the Taliban in charge? And secondly, Congressman John Ratcliffe, why are you renominating him?
He's a terrific man. He's been fantastic at everything he's done. He's highly respected. He wanted to wait till after the IG report came in, as you saw. Originally, I don't think he was officially or formally nominated. His name was thrown out, but he wanted to wait till after the IG report. The IG report has now come, and we've learned a lot of very bad things from the IG report, as you know very well. And I think he'll go through a process, and it'll go fairly quickly. He's a very respected man. Somebody that I've gotten to like, somebody who really has, he's someone who's really distinguished himself, and I think over the last year and a half, 2 years in particular. So we're very happy with that. As far as the Taliban is concerned, everybody wanted this to happen. The Taliban wanted it to happen. President Ghani was very much involved in this, as you know, and he's now dealing with the Taliban. But we're talking about 19 years we've been there, 19 years, and other presidents have tried to do this. The Taliban has given a pledge, and a very strong pledge, and we'll see how that all works out. We hope it's going to work out very well. I think they have big incentives to do it, but they have to take care of the terrorists and kill the terrorists. We'll be working in a different kind of a fashion toward that end. But the job we've done has been a fantastic one in terms of terrorists and terrorism, and it's time for our people to start coming home.
Mr. President, you mentioned the drop of spread in China, the coronavirus cases. Is the U.S. government considering evaluating similar measures in the U.S. in case the situation gets
Some
worse?
measures, we've been in very close contact with China, including myself with President Xi. He very much wanted this to happen. He wanted this to get out and finished and be done. He's been working very, very hard, I can tell you that. And they're making a lot of progress in China. You probably saw Starbucks are now opened again. You probably saw that, as I mentioned, Tim just came out and he said Apple is back to normal in terms of production in their facilities in China. They've made a lot of progress.
Thank you. Couple of questions, one of them technical. The woman who passed away, did she travel to South Korea, or is she a case of community spread?
Whoops. Yeah, the case, again, this is why we're talking about the community cases with no link to travel. So the investigation at this time shows no evidence of link to travel or a known contact.
Okay, and also you said that Americans as a whole are at a low risk. Are Americans on the west coast of the United States at a low risk? And are you considering restricting travel within the United States?
So I just want to emphasize again that the Americans, independent of where they live in this nation, are at low risk, all right? And we're going to continue to evaluate aggressively these on-link cases as we see them. And as we learn, we'll obviously communicate that.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Why are you considering closing the border with Mexico since there are so many more cases here than there? And another question, are you working with the governments from Brazil and Mexico to try to coordinate a response about this? Did you talk to President Bolsonaro?
Well, we have a great relationship, as you know, with Mexico. We have 27,000 soldiers. They're soldiers on our border doing a fantastic job. Our numbers are way down. People coming into our country illegally. We have ports of entry that we are keeping open, and we're not talking about it. We're thinking about all borders. We have to think about that border, but right now that is not a border as it pertains to what we're talking about here. This is not a border that seems to be much of a problem right now. We hope we won't have to do that. Yes, please.
Mr. President, if I could just follow on Afghanistan.
No, you aren't. Please.
Thank you very much, President. I'm just wondering what's the communication with China look like right now, and does the experience and lessons coming from China will help the U.S. dealing with the current situation?
Well, I think our relationship with China is very good. We just did a big trade deal. We're starting on another trade deal with China, a very big one, and we've been working very closely. They've been talking to our people. We've been talking to their people, having to do with the virus. And no, our relationship with China is very good. Maybe it's closer because of what's happened here. Because it was, you know, in a certain way, this can bring the world closer. If you want to know, it can really do that. Go ahead.
On Afghanistan, if I could just follow up, you pride yourself on a deal maker, but your former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, has said that this is an Obama-style deal and sends the wrong message to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. What did the Taliban give up here?
Yeah, first of all,
will you be hosting the Taliban in Washington at Camp David, or will you meet them abroad?
We'll look at that. Look, nobody should be criticizing this deal after 19 years. He had his chance. He didn't do it. He was very much in favor of going in. We should have never gone in the first place. When they went into Iraq, listen. When they went into Iraq, when they went into the Middle East in such a fashion, I was very much against it. Shouldn't have gone in. He thought we should have. That's been proven wrong. I'm surprised that anybody would be against something where we try and end a 19-year war. We're 8,000 miles away from our home. We've done a great job in the sense that we've killed a lot of terrorists. We've put them out of commission. Who knows what they would have done if we didn't do that. But it's time for us to come home. Now, the Taliban working with other nations, perhaps, because you're surrounded by other very strong nations. And whether it's Pakistan or Iran or lots of other places, including Russia, they can all work on this. We've been doing it for nations that are surrounding Afghanistan. Now it's time for us to start coming home. And I think it's a very good situation. President Ghani is working on it very hard. We'll see how that works out. But the United States has done great services for people all over the world that, frankly, I don't think they've been given the kind of respect that they should be given for what we've done. What we have done for the world is incredible. And usually we don't even get a thank you. In Afghanistan, we did something, and I will tell you, for the most part, I noticed he was negative, but he should have tried to do something better. He was here for a year. He could have done something better. I was all ears, and he wasn't able to do that. The deal has a chance to be extremely good, but what it does do is we start bringing our people back home.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Go ahead.
The other day you spoke about the impact, the financial impact, the economic impact of the coronavirus on our country. Yesterday there was a letter that was sent out publicly by the Federal Reserve Chairman talking about steps that the Fed may do to prevent economic impacts to happening here in the United States. What's your reaction? Is that enough, that kind of a letter?
No, I think the Fed has a very important role, and especially psychological. I mean, if you look at the Fed has a massive impact. Lots of it is psychological, and lots of it is fact. This is something I think they should have done even beyond this and before this, because other countries that are not as nearly as prime, we're the greatest in the world. It's our currency, everything. We have everything. We should have the lowest interest rates. We don't have the lowest interest rates. Our Fed rate is higher. You look at Germany, you look at Japan, you look at other countries. They have, many of them have negative rates.
I agree with what he's saying right there. I really do. I don't understand the mindset of the feds in doing what they've done. But neither nor did I agree with what they done in the early 80s towards bringing interest rate to 16, 17, 18, in some places even 22, 24% interest. Other than greed. Other than greed.
And we are not put in that position because of our Fed. And now we have this problem. You saw where Germany is lowering and also infusing a lot of money into their economy, a tremendous amount. I haven't heard our Fed say they should do this. Our Fed should start being a leader, not a follower. Our Fed has been a follower. We need a Fed that's going to be a leader. We should have at least the same rates and ideally lower rates than other countries. We shouldn't be paying more, but we're forced to pay more in interest, and we are the most prime. Think of it. Biggest economy in the world by far. China would have overtaken us in this year. They were expected to for 5 years. 2019, they were going to overtake us. They're not even close, and they won't be close. As long as somebody smart is right here, they won't be closed. But I will say this, the relationship with them is good, but as far as the Fed is concerned, our Fed should be a leader. Our Fed has not been a leader at all.
Face meeting with the Fed.
Frankly, we could refinance our debt at even lower rates. The rates are very low, but we should be refinancing debt at even lower rates. Our Fed is making us pay more than we should, and that's ridiculous.
President, thank you. You mentioned you're having the meeting on Monday with the pharmaceutical executives. Right. As you know, the process of approving medicines is complex and time-consuming.
I think this process will go very quickly.
What powers will you use?
Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, this process is going to go very quickly. And you know, that was, excuse me?
The head of the FDA is here.
Yeah, we can do that. You want to do that?
We're expediting.
Okay, would you like to say something? All right.
Okay.
That'd be great. And the private companies, too, that you're talking about doing tests with.
So we are working very diligently with industry. We're using our authorities in an expedited fashion to help with the development of therapeutics, particularly around the coronavirus. As you probably know, we issued a policy this morning that allows us to have a lot of flexibility around the development of diagnostic tests. Our colleagues at the CDC have done a great job to have an increase in those tests, and we expect this policy to have a significant impact on that as well. Thanks.
Mr. President.
By the way, the meeting with the pharmaceutical companies was actually set up before over drug pricing because we want prices to go way down. But it turns out to be a very convenient meeting as it pertains to the vaccine.
So you'll talk about both?
Talk about both.
Thank you, Mr. President. You put the Vice President in charge of coronavirus coordination across the government. When he was governor of Indiana, the Vice President allowed an HIV outbreak to spiral out of control because he did not heed the advice of his public health professional advisors who said that a needle exchange was necessary at the beginning of the outbreak. What guarantee can you give Americans that political considerations and ideological issues will play no role in your government's response to this virus?
Well, let me just respond quickly, and then I'm going to have Mike say something about that because I've heard very good explanations, actually. When it came to health care, Indiana has been a leader, an absolute leader, and it was really started with others, but by Mike Pence, and he's done a phenomenal job on health care. One of the best, if not the best in the country. And with that, I'll let Mike respond specifically if you want to.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. When I was governor of the state of Indiana, we actually had two experiences with the spread of infectious diseases. The first was in 2014 when Indiana was where the very first MERS case in the United States arrived. Obviously an infectious disease much more deadly than the coronavirus that we're dealing with today. It was then when I was governor that I learned of the extraordinary capabilities of CDC. I worked with my health officials in the state of Indiana, worked with federal officials, and maybe most importantly, learned the invaluable role that local health officials play in dealing with the spread of infectious disease. I'm proud to say that the state of Indiana secured that patient, found out everyone they'd ever contacted. There were no additional infections, and that patient recovered. There was only one other MERS disease. The other incident was in 2015. We had an outbreak of HIV in a very small town that emerged in early 2015. My health officials came to me. We immediately deployed health resources. The truth is HIV/AIDS was being spread by people sharing needles in intravenous drug use. And the state of Indiana did not allow for providing a needle exchange to citizens. But the CDC came in and made a recommendation, and I declared a public health emergency and made for 30 days a needle exchange available in the state of Indiana. And I'm proud to say that every one of those patients was treated. We ended the spread of the HIV/AIDS virus in that community. But again, as I've said before, I think, as the President and I have discussed, I think my experience as a governor dealing with two different infectious diseases and seeing the vital role that local healthcare providers play, that federal officials play, it has really informed me. It's one of the reasons why I've been spending a lot of time talking to governors. I met yesterday with state health officials and the governor in Florida, and I'm proud of the work that we did in the state of Indiana, and I hope to continue to bring all of the best minds together to deal with this issue.
He's doing a great job. Go ahead. He's doing a great job. Great answer. Thank you.
2 days ago, 36 Turkish soldiers were killed in Idlib, Syria. And today, Turkish foreign...
When was that? When?
2 days ago.
Yeah.
And today, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said Turkey wants a Patriot air defense system from United States. Are you in talk with Turkish government regarding...
We're speaking to President Erdogan a lot, and we are talking to him about exactly what you're referring to.
Are you able to do anything from a policy or reassurance standpoint to try to deal with...
The markets will all come back. The markets are very strong. The consumer is unbelievably strong. The companies are very strong. We have one problem. We have to get this problem brought into focus, and it is right now. I think our professionals are doing a great job. I'm not thinking in terms. Well, it's certainly not a good situation. When you lose travel, that's a big part of market. But for a period of time, we're going to have to do whatever is necessary. Safety, health, number one. Where the markets will take care of themselves. The companies are very powerful. Our consumer has never been in a better position than they are right now. Larry Kudlow was telling me before that the numbers, I said, don't even bring it up, what difference, but that the numbers are very strong. He's got numbers from Friday, very strong. You see the numbers. But our focus is on exactly this. It's not on that. That will take care of itself.
I want to weigh in on something that he's talking about right there. First of all, I want to apologize for misinterpreting what he said late yesterday evening pertaining to the hoax. Because I have sat and listened to all these different news broadcasters, these commentators, that has been leaning more and more towards some of the statements that I put out today coming from the Windmill Ministries in regards to what is going on with this guy. Secondly, and I think most importantly, what I want to say is, from all the data that I've been listening to, in which I don't know if I'm listening to more data than what he's listening to, or if maybe I've been a sucker towards listening to data similar towards last night, that because of all the input of today brought me to the conclusion of me putting out the material that I put out today in regards to the hoax. But I have been listening to other media entities, like over in Italy, Spain, and other parts of the world, where economies have been just barely hanging on. They've just barely been struggling towards hanging on. And now, because of this corona disease, it's basically going to finish them off. And yes, I think this includes Germany, the way that I was hearing some commentators talking. Like I said, if I have misinterpreted what I'm hearing, or if they are producing fake news, please forgive me. Please forgive me. But at the same time, if all these countries that I have been listening to are sure enough at the brink of collapse, this is going to formulate into something much, much bigger than what the President of the United States is releasing right now to the general public, pertaining to the seriousness that this could result in on a global, worldwide stage. And as I said, if I have misinterpreted this, if I have been giving false information pertaining to fake news, please forgive me. Just like last night, I did not actually hear the statement that the president made to the South Carolinians until about 15 minutes before the president decided to speak today on these issues. Most of the stuff that I was listening to this morning was secondary off of other people's opinions about the hoax. They was taking the word hoax and reinventing the translation or the transliteration of the way that he presented the word out of context. And I was not aware of that until about 10 or 15 minutes before he started speaking today, was whenever I actually heard what he said last night on the podium speaking to the people in South Carolina. I understand that certain people could have very well misinterpreted what he was talking about or taken it out of context towards what he was talking about. And now, since he's re-clarifying, I understand more clearly that he was not actually saying that the coronavirus is a hoax. He was saying that the techniques that the Democrats are using on him and the Republican Party was another hoax, indicating that the Russia investigation was a hoax, indicating that the deal that happened with the Ukrainians was another Democrat hoax. So my condolences in the person, first of all, that died here in America, as well as all the other people who have died because of this coronavirus. But keep in mind, we have thousands and thousands of people every day that's dying. Not just in car accidents, not just in gun shooting incidences pertaining to massive, horrible gun control violence pertaining to these people that get out here and do what they're doing. But we have thousands of people dying every day because of heart attacks, aneurysms, strokes, blood clots, tuberculosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, cancer, people being overweight, diabetes. I could go down a long, long list. I don't have the medical list in front of me. But we have thousands of people that die every day, because of unhealthy related issues. Unhealthy related issues that in reality, if it was looked upon and exposed to the general public, it would probably frighten most people to know how many people are actually dying on a day-to-day basis because of health-related issues. Just like kind of like our veterans committing suicide. Somewhere between 22 and 25 a day are taking their own lives. I don't know what the statistics are pertaining to the cop suicides, but it's way on up there too. But if people realize the chaoticness of all this sickness and all this negative energy that has been dispersed amongst the American people here in the American land, they would probably get sick and throw up. Not counting all the children, lives that be destroyed on account of various issues that I just got through explaining. We have reached a pivotal point here in the world, not just here in America, to where the fulfillment of that in which what God was telling the 7 churches in the first 4 chapters of Revelations is fulfilling itself, that I will throw thee off into a bed of sickness. We have reached that point right now. And I classify the point of where we are right now is because of what went on 30 plus years ago in 1988 during Ronald Reagan's administration before George H.W.H. Bush become president. I see what happened in 88 pertaining to the ending of the Cold War with the superpowers as that being a milestone, a monumental moment that happened in society that has put us then where we are now. Because I was only about 27 years old whenever that occurred. And of course now I'm soon to be 59, give or take 30, 31, 32 years later. So I can read between the lines and look at the past to categorize of what has occurred in different patterns towards where we are right now. We're in a state of despair is where the American people are right now in comparison to where we was, let's say back in the 70s or throughout the 80s. And even for a short period of time throughout the 90s. Up until Bill Clinton made all the agreements with NAFTA of the free trade agreement. And hopefully this man here that's standing in front of you right now will somehow or another change that balance. Like I said, we all of a sudden got the cart in front of the horse, looking at it from an economical, global standpoint, pertaining to competing with all these other countries, regardless whether it was Mexico, South America, India, China, Japan, Korea, or some of these other countries. We got the cart way in front of the horse, and basically we outpriced ourselves out of these markets because we was so unbalanced in what the majority of the people was making during the 70s, 80s, and the 90s versus the rest of the world. I mean, whenever you're paying somebody like General Motors or Ford or Chrysler, give or take about $45 an hour, plus if you add all the benefits to it, puts it up there to about $65 an hour. You're paying somebody $65 an hour to stand on an assembly line, and I'm just using this as one particular metaphor. You're paying this individual to put radiator caps on radiators every time a vehicle goes down the assembly line. And they put, let's say, 65, 70, maybe 80 radiator caps on this assembly line per hour, every hour, before they hit the clock and go home. You're paying them $65 an hour with the benefit package. Everything. But yet now you got people down in Mexico that's building the same vehicle, Dodges, or whatever, and you're only paying that person $12 an hour working on the assembly line. And I bet if that be known, that person isn't just putting on radiator caps. He's probably putting on every cap, regardless whether it be the water cap, the engine oil cool cap, the oil cap, the power steering cap, the brake cap. In other words, he's really earning his money down there in Mexico and only getting paid a fourth of what they was paying the same employee doing the same jobs up here in this country doing the exact same thing. So we outpriced ourselves. That's the reason why so many buildings right now are vacant. That's the reason why so many of these buildings that used to be predominant factories working, not just here in Northwest Tennessee, but all over the country, are now sitting as idle, empty tombstones. And that was the very thing that Donald Trump run on towards trying to eliminate, because he realized that that was a tattletale sign of a failed economy or a failed country in regards to being able to produce adequate work for their employees. And naturally, one thing led to another. You know, whenever you don't have the work, whenever you don't have the hope, you lose morale. The next thing you know, the suicide rate goes up. The next thing you know, more people get involved in alcohol. They get involved in drugs. One thing leads to another. It's a dominoes effect. And of course, now all of a sudden, this president has this that's thrown up onto his plate. And once more, I'm sorry that I misinterpreted various commentators this morning in not analyzing the material properly of him saying that the coronavirus was in fact a hoax. And he was not actually saying that. He was saying that the intentions coming from the Democrat Party was being used in their tactics in the same format as he believes of what occurred during the Russia investigation as well as the Ukrainian investigation. So he did help to clarify and to clear that up. And I'm glad that he did, because that was one genie that needed to be put back into the bottle, especially whenever you're dealing with something this crucial of people's lives getting sicker and sicker and sicker on a day-to-day level. And believe it or not, we was already in a crisis. We was already in a crisis before the coronavirus ever even struck over in China. We just didn't declare it. We didn't declare it. Pertaining to all the gun violence and all the health issues that people was going through. I mean, whenever you look at the sexual transmitted diseases pertaining to herpes and AIDS, herpes and the syphilis and the crabs and skankies or scabies, whatever that word is, scabies. Whenever you get to looking at all the problems pertaining to the sexual transmitted diseases, it's absolutely overwhelming. Especially if you get to looking at your coastal line areas, especially if you get to looking down at Florida. That's one of the reasons why that I've been basically living like a priest for the past, I guess, 15 years, ever since my wife walked out of my life, kind of like a monk, towards abstaining and staying away from sexual encounters with female activity, because you don't never know. If you wind up going to bed with one of them, you wind up catching something that penicillin can't take care of. I mean, I have seen some very, very gross things on the internet pertaining to social media regarding people's sexual activities and the results of their sexual activities that reaches a level, as far as I'm concerned, of a crisis. But you don't hear the medical industry saying nothing about that. Not on the level that it's talking about right now pertaining to the corona disease, which, as far as I'm concerned, should have been brought out years ago. And how displacing and how that it has dwarfed people's lives to the point of people becoming basically disabled or hospitalized or even at the point of death because of these type of illnesses. Once more, to put this all in a nutshell, if you'll go back and analyze, in which I was questioned yesterday by my niece out in California, Dennis, what is it talking about whenever it says, for I gave her space to repent of her fornication, and she repented not, and I will throw them off into a sickbed? She asked me point blank, who is her that he's talking about? Her is the bride of Christ. For Christ is the bridegroom. we as a church down here are supposed to be the bride. So he was talking at that particular point in time to the bride. Her. I gave her space to repent of her fornication, and she repented not. And the Bible goes on and says, for I will throw thee off into great tribulation, except thou repent. Or off into a sickbed. Just look at all the diseases that's running rampant pertaining to people's health failing them. Within a week, I found out what happened to my cousin over in Lynn, Missouri. He died of an overdose of an illegal substance that was sold on the streets. That's what, he had something like 97% in his blood system. That's what caused him to die at the age of 46. And it wouldn't have been no different if he would have jumped off of a building, or if he'd have swallowed a handful of sleeping pills and drunk a bunch of whiskey and ended his life. It wouldn't have been no different if he would have sliced his wrist or stuck a gun to his mouth and pulled the trigger. He basically was murdered. We don't know if this meth or this something, menthol or whatever you want to call it, the drug, we don't know if it was intentionally given to him out of ignorance to the point that he wound up taking this, not knowing what the end result was going to be, or if he was actually trying to take his own life because he had a bad injury a couple years ago and had a severe head injury pertaining to a mental injury that damaged his head, and it could be that he had lost the state of him not realizing what he was doing. In other words, he shouldn't be held accountable for his actions of what he done because of the injury that he had prior, 2 years prior to that. That's the reason why they got a lawsuit up there in the state of Missouri, because of the road not being marked properly. And this wasn't the first time that they had such of an injury. But the point that I'm trying to make is this: he's not the first one that I've heard to die at the age of 46. I had a cousin a few years ago that died of stage 3 or 4 cancer that was ate up with it, and the doctors couldn't even basically treat it. And I'm hearing of more and more cases of young people dying of overdose. People that are junkies, people that are doing drugs, people that are hooked, people that's dying on cancer, tuberculosis, other types of bad diseases. So we're here. The point that I'm trying to make is that at the bottom shell, in of itself, we are here at the point of what I'm talking about in the first 4 chapters of Revelations, where God is speaking to the churches. He is speaking to her because she wouldn't repent of their wicked and sinful ways. And basically, whenever it gets to this point, it's not actually that God is causing these injuries. It's that Satan has deceived the world to the point that it has become a very, very toxic place to live in. And now God can no longer protect those lives under that umbrella of protectionness any longer. And basically Satan has taken over to the point that he's out to kill, steal, and destroy. And he's doing just exactly that. We're seeing hundreds, thousands, not just cops committing suicide, not just veterans committing suicide, but we're seeing hundreds of thousands of people that's dying every cotton picking year here in America. And this is just going to be basically the cherry on top. Another dilemma, another log on the fire, per se, of people's bad health, including my own. I mean, whenever I first come back to Tennessee in 2014, I didn't have diabetes. I was maintaining what I was maintaining, or my body at that time, pertaining to my pancreas and my liver and my kidney, not kidneys, but one kidney, was still in function towards taking care of itself. But I declare my bad health failing because of all the problems that various people around the neighborhood has helped to create, just because of me moving back here, being agitated on a day-to-day, week-to-week level, having all these churches banning me, even though they've never talked to me, even though they've never sat down and actually wanted to spend any time with me towards understanding why I started witnessing and preaching to society 30-something years ago in 1989, whenever I first stepped out into the eyes of the general public. And because of me losing my brother, and because of all the other events that went on in my life, it was overwhelming to my emotions. And once it become overwhelming to my emotions, I become depressed. Once I become depressed, it added insult to injury. The next thing I know, the only thing that I could think of is set, eat, gorge, and sleep. 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 Well, if you do this periodically, after a period of time, if you don't have failing health, you soon will, because of the weight gain. And the weight gain is what has brought on the diabetes in my particular situation. Everybody's different. Everybody has a unique situation. But a lot of this had to do with my emotions pertaining to what I was going through. And I still declare to this day that it was so stressful on my brother, because he had already went through some bad deals with his health. Plus he was working at the time 60 hours a week, standing on his feet 10 hours a day. And because the emotional aspect was so emotional to him, it overwhelmed him to the point that it put him in an early grave. Now, don't sit here and tell me that emotions is not a real factor. We know for a fact that as an airplane is descending and people thinks that they're fixing to die, in the exchange of that event, several people could actually die because of their emotions throwing them off into a heart attack or throwing them off into a stroke. So your emotions that you can't tangibly see, but we know it exists in your mind and in your body, can make a big deal on a human being's health and welfare, to what that person, he or she, is experiencing during the time that they are experiencing it. And that's the part that the Weakley County judicial system here in Weakley County did not get. I was talking to my niece probably a day or two ago. I'm still in contact with her. She still wants to stay in contact with what's going on out here. This was a day or two after the police officer come to my presence here at 291 Thompson Road and gave me a verbal warning from the Oklahoma authorities there at the Memorial Park there in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, that if I was planning on coming to the 25th anniversary of the memorial site, that if I decided that I was going to go back to the park, that I could expect to be arrested on the spot. On the spot. In other words, they're still holding my feet to the fire, even though it's been proven that what that they had done was wrong to their own citizens. And I tend to wonder if I care more about the Oklahoma citizens than they care about themselves. But it was formally, and I guess you could use the word legally, used to the degree that if I so much as go out there and touch one red finger, one toe on that memorial site, that I would be immediately arrested and thrown in jail for criminal trespassing, because I was banned in 2009, even though I was the one that discovered towards it being a major cover-up that occurred out in the Oklahoma incident that happened in 1995. I was explaining to my niece, Julie, do you have any idea how many police officers has been at either 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, or how many police officers has been to 430 Beech Grove Road since I've come back here in 2014? She said, no, how many? I said, probably if you counted every officer, and this includes the officers that has come out here routinely, some of them 7, 8, 10 times, as many as 4 or 5 cars at a time. If you counted the times that they come out here since I've been back to Tennessee in 2014, I bet you it would exceed over 200 officers. Maybe, I may be conservative with my number. It may be more in the line of 250 or 300 officers. Especially whenever you continue to call again and again and again, help, help, help. We need help out here. And 4 or 5 of them show up this week. And then a week later, 4 or 5 of them show up. And then a month later, another 3 or 4 or 5 of them show up. I mean, the proof was in the pudding that something was going on out here. And it was going on in a most severe, heinous, unusual way. And I asked my niece, I said, do you not see where this is unusual? Where some individual has, it's almost like that it was like a magnet that was magnetized to me, of all these police officers that wanted to come down here and be a part of this. But yet, no, they was all scratching their head and wasn't no charges being presented until there at the very last, whenever my brother died, and then they caught me whenever I was most vulnerable, in a state of remorse, in a state of grieving for my brother, is whenever they made the final kill. Boom! We got him! He didn't show up on his own arraignment, even though the attorney that he hired never let him know when the date was. Go get him! We'll stop this. Once more, yeah, you stopped it in an unjust form by having me arrested. That added that much more insult to injury pertaining to my personal health issues. My personal health issues. Because if the things would have been addressed properly before I ever even come back here, and once a final statement come down to the families and the people that was doing this to my brother, this was way before I ever come back here. I think that the message would have been so crystal clear that they would have dared to have challenged the system any longer. And whenever I come back here, it would have been peace and harmony. And the aggravation did not stop by the Weakley County authorities. It didn't stop by Judge Pence. It did not stop by Judge Tommy Moore. It did not stop by the probation officers. It did not stop by the sheriff's department. It did not stop by the Tennessee prosecutors. It only stopped whenever God intervened and started taking human casualties, where I started seeing them fall. I started seeing my enemies severed down. And that's whenever the message finally got out to the general community around here. Leave him alone. It took a period of 5 years while I sat back and was very patient in understanding that I was being set up. I was going through some sort of a trial. It took 5 years. And officers, 200 and 300, coming out here during that span. And it took the death of various people in the community before the community finally woke up and said, wow, what is really going on there at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. The guy that's got the broken cross in front of his building. What is really happening there in that neighborhood? It took 5 years before people finally come to their senses and finally woke up in understanding the severity of all this. In the meantime, I'm still dealing with my health issues towards me basically being 300, and last I looked was 339 pounds. Taking diabetes medicine in the morning and taking diabetes medicine in the afternoons. It's making me more susceptible and vulnerable to this coronavirus because, as I was saying a while ago, I don't know if I'm just listening to more media than what the president is, but as of yesterday, I heard that the dying statistic rate was 7% of those who had prior health issues, including diabetes, that if you catch this coronavirus, you have a 7% chance of dying because of it. Now that's what I heard yesterday from various doctors and various professional people. I don't know how true it is. I don't know how true it is. But it sounds to me like we are at where the Bible is talking to the 7 churches to repent, or I will throw thee off into a sick bed. I'm hearing of cases everywhere where people now are dying at extremely young ages. And the only thing that I can hope for throughout all this, and one may say, well, that's awful cruel, or that's awful mean. The individuals that engaged up into this cover-up that occurred in 1988, whenever the proper channel should have exposed the trueness and the realness of biblical Bible prophecy, is that the people that engaged in this, the elderly people, I hope they live long remaining lives. I hope they live into their 100 or 110 or maybe even 120 or 130 years old. And I hope they live long enough for the system to completely, totally crash to the point that they actually take the mark 666. And if they don't take the mark, I pray to God that their children or that their children's children will take the mark. Because according to the way that I have interpreted the Bible, during the time that this occurs, death will be entirely too good for these people that was so wicked, that has caused so much destruction in human beings' life, that they will be tortured for 1,000 years upon this planet, and they will literally beg to want to die, according to the Bible, according to the book of Revelations. They will literally want to die, and death will flee from them. In other words, if you cut off their head during this time, they're still going to live. They're still going to know that they're being tortured by God. They are literally going to be punished by God Almighty because of their wickedness that they have brought upon to society. That's the best that I can hope for. Because the Bible says that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Now, do I wish that upon all people? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In no way, form, or fashion do I wish that upon all people. I just wish that upon the devil's people. The people that had embarked upon to this cover-up. And you know, if they don't get tortured in a physical form, they'll be tortured in a spiritual form. So if they think that they're going to escape this torture by going ahead and checking out, it ain't going to work, buddy. You're still going to have to give an account. All these people that was engaged in this cover-up, after a man went out here and worked his you-know-what off and worn out 4 or 5 automobiles, never got 10% discount on none of the paperwork or none of the materials that he was putting out in the church sector, never got any type of credibility towards the international superpowers agreement pertaining to ending of the Cold War, never got any type of credit, in which I'm not doing this for credit. This has never been about Jubby. It's always been about God, the Heavenly Father, and His Son, Jesus Christ, and the miracles that God has done for me, and the calling that that has been placed upon me to give to society. It has always been about Him, and about the message coming from Him. It has never been about Jubby. But to hear them talk, they'll tell you, oh, he's trying to idolize himself in all this. Oh, no. Anybody that's went through such pain and suffering as I've went through in the past 30-something years in the name of the ministry, in the name of righteousness' sake, that has went through what I've went through, it's never been about me trying to glorify myself or idolize myself in any form or fashion. I've always known the position that God has placed me into towards me being simply just the messenger. It was the rest of the community that bucked because they didn't like the message. And because they didn't like the message, they was gonna show me how the cow was gonna eat the cabbage. Or we'll just show him, we just won't support him. Well, that's what they done at first. And then once they realized that that wasn't good enough, because of the theory of the tactic that they was using towards trying to prove me as me being unfit or crazy, then they started attacking me and tried to make me out to be a homegrown terrorist. Said that I was falsifying files. Said that I was doing this for a celebrity stunt. It's never been about a celebrity stunt. It's never been about no falsifying files. It's been about the message. And it's been about trying to lead people to the Lord Jesus Christ so that their souls would not perish in hell. The same way that God had mercy upon me, until finally I gave in and said, Lord, let me be a follower of yours. And of course, as you become Christ's disciple, and once you reach a level of discipleness, then you become more than just a disciple. Then you become an apostle. What does an apostle do? An apostle tries to go out and find other converts to turn them into disciples, and then eventually those disciples will become apostles towards doing the exact same thing. It's kind of like the pyramid thing, to where the cornerstone was Christ. It wasn't Jubby. Never was Jubby. Wasn't Muhammad, wasn't Allah, wasn't Buddha, Wasn't some other crazy idea. Wasn't David Koresh. Wasn't Jim Jones. Wasn't Muhammad Ali. Wasn't none of these figures. There's only one true cornerstone, which is the cornerstone of Christ, God's only begotten Son. It's these people around here that failed the ministry. It's not that the ministry failed them. That's the reason why we're in the shape that we're in. It's because they started out being in denial, and then they got very, very hateful and bold, and they went from being in denial towards actually attacking and hoping that I would get on the same level in their temptations. You know, if I would have hit the individual, Donald Ridgway, out here in the middle of the street somewhere, and because he basically died of a blood clot in his head, an aneurysm, if I would have hit him in the face or in the head, struck him basically anywhere on his body, I guarantee you right now I would be facing lawsuits out the yin yang. I would be facing possibly losing not only the rest of my liberty, but I would be facing towards losing what little bit of property and what little bit of sanity that I have remaining. If I would have gave in to that temptation and hit him, I would have had some sort of charges against me right now pending. Right now. Because of the family, the way that they was attacking. Not just me, but David, my father, James Robert Jackson, and Danny. The whole family was subject under this type of scrutiny and this type of pain. And it wasn't just coming from one family. It was coming from several families locally around here. And of course, there at the last, I woke up to the fact that, you know what? A lot of this is stemming from the Wiccans right up the road here, less than a quarter of a mile away, of their demonic features towards them denying the powers coming from the Creator. And as they worship their demonic figures towards their witches and their warlocks. Because God had showed me where the original core of origin was coming from. Right up the road here, called the Castle people, the Wiccans. They literally was on an assignment to destroy my life. And they come within inches of it. They come within inches of it. And you have to ask the question, why was they trying to destroy you for? Had you done something personally to the Wiccans? Nope. Hadn't done nothing personally to none of these people. I've never been a car salesman. I've never flirted around with any of these local girls around here, much less dated them or jumped from bedroom to bedroom. My first wife was a girl that moved from Missouri over here, which was my first girlfriend and my first wife, and that's the woman that I had a child by. I didn't flirt around with these whores around here. These scallywags. Why would I wanted to? I knowed all the other people that they was flip-flopping and jumping in bed with. I didn't want to get infested. I didn't want to get contaminated. That's the reason why I didn't fool around like a lot of these old Joes did, being a gigolobe in the community, a community gigolobe. And that's probably one reason why they're so upset at me, is because I wasn't so footloose and fancy-free. And I'm never going to be footloose and fancy-free. I don't know that there'll ever be another relationship in my life, because I can't trust the majority of the women over here in America, in addition to the majority of them as far as I'm concerned. Not all of them, but the majority of them are contaminated. And if they're not contaminated on a physical form towards a disease, they're contaminated with their ideology. They're contaminated with their morale. They're contaminated with their motives of the reason why they ever even get involved in a human being's life to begin with, is basically to take them for everything that they're worth. I have seen young male, old male, middle-aged male be taken advantage of again and again and again. Communities, farms, businesses that corrupt judges set back and allowed for a stinking whore to ruin that individual's life, and in a lot of situations ruin the whole family business. And you think I want to be footloose and fancy free? I'm trying to hang on to every inch of whatever that I got, including my very own life right now. I have been in a survival state for quite some time, basically ever since I've come back here in 2014. But now you try to reconcile that with the judges here. You try to reconcile that with the dirty, corrupt sheriff that's been in power now for 30-something years, that's been elected now for 9 different terms here in Weakley County. You try to explain that to the corrupt preachers around here that knows what's going on in their congregation, and they continue to cover it up and act like that they don't know what husband is fooling around with what man's wife. You try to convince these other corrupt individuals in this area towards their wrongdoings. So as far as I'm concerned, the best that I can do is to hang on to what I got and pray to God that if they themselves don't take the mark, 666, that maybe their children or their children's children would take it, because of what that they are guilty of in the eyes of God. Not just in the eyes of one particular person, the person that's talking to you right now pertaining to the founder of the Windmill Ministries, but in the eyes of God. They have set back and let this disease grow and intensify.
Are you considering any tax breaks to help ease the pain?
I think the big thing we're looking for is the Fed to do its job. If the Fed does its job, that's what we are really looking for. Prior to this, as you know, we announced that we're going to be at the end of the year, toward the end of the year, we're going to be announcing a middle income tax cut. In order to get that through, I don't think the Democrats are going to be approving any tax cuts because they like to raise taxes instead of lower taxes. But we'll be, in the not too distant future, announcing a very major middle income tax cut. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
How can you say the market about the momentum?
Go ahead, please.
Mr. President.
People started to buy hand sanitizer and food supplies and also medical supplies to prepare. And there are news about some of the items are out of stock. Do you think they should get prepared and also...
I think it's always good to be prepared. I think it's always good. But we are super prepared. When you hear 43 million masks as an example. All right, we'll do one more. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. It has been reported yesterday that you are willing at this point to meet with leaders.
I want to weigh in on one more thing. I went to 3 different Walmarts just within the past 24 hours and couldn't find a mask nowhere. Not a mask nowhere. Matter of fact, I went to the hardware department and tried to get one of those dust masks, like you use to help keep dust and stuff out of your lungs because you're sawing a board or something. You know, just a standard paper mask. None. 0. Now, I'm not saying that there's no mask out there available. Maybe in the hardware department, in other stores. Maybe in some of the other retail stores. Or, I don't know, maybe go to a parts store and you might be able to find a good, decent mask. But as of yesterday, in a 24-hour period, I looked and searched for masks and couldn't find none nowhere.
Of Russia, China, the UK, and France discuss arms control issues, among other things.
They all want to discuss arms control, and that's a wise thing. We're spending now over $20 billion on nuclear and on the super speed missiles and many other things. And they have come to me, and they all want to now discuss arms control. And that includes China, and that includes Russia. And I think it's very smart of them to want to do it, and I think it's very smart of us to want to do it. And we will be discussing...
My opinion about that, it's counterproductive whenever it comes to peace and utopia. And it just stands to reason how upside down and crazy that everything is, regardless whether it be the Americans, China, the Russians, or whoever, whenever all they're thinking about is missiles and bombs, missiles and bombs, bombs and missiles, bombs and missiles, missiles and bombs, missiles and bombs. That's all they're thinking about. Steadily heading towards that inedible doomsday mark. To where one country helps to take out another country, and that country helps to take out another country, in ending civilization as we know it. And if that is not insanity, I'm willing to kiss the president's you-know-what and give him 30 minutes to draw a crowd, if that's not declared as being insane. It's not only counterproductive whenever you look at the big picture pertaining to peace and utopia, but it's insanity whenever you're having all these countries that want to be motivated by more bombs and more missiles and more military equipment. Where do you think all that's ultimately going to lead to? You think that's ultimately going to lead to peace and utopia? Wrong answer, Holmes. What it's going to lead to is the end of civilization as we know it. And that, I think, is where various individuals that are highly motivated in power pertaining to these high-ranking individuals, that's where they want to go with this. Because they don't want to be left here living during the time that the Antichrist actually rules and reigns, to the point that the system is no longer based around American currency or the yen or the rubles or any other type of currency. They want it to be quick and sudden and to the point. That way they don't have to worry about taking the mark 666. I got news for these heathens. I got news for these Donald Trumps. I got news for these emperors and these oligarchs. I got news for these corrupt, demonic, evil dictators all over the world. It's not going to be quick. It's not going to be simple. And it's not going to be easy. I know that that's how you would like for it to end. But it's not going to end that way. The Bible says very clearly that it would be easier for all of heaven and for all of earth to pass than for one jot or one tittle of the word thy God to fail. And if it's written in stone for these different seals to be opened, pertaining to the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, pertaining to the unleashing of various things that God intends to unleash upon this planet, if it's written for these things to occur, I don't care how many Donald Trumps, I don't care how many communities, Cydonia and Hopin, Sharon, Kenton, Weakley County, O'Brien County communities that you want to put together, it's not going to happen that way, Mr. President. Quit selling these people all this malarkey. Quit selling these people all these lies and all these endless hopes towards thinking that it's going to end quick and suddenly. Because it's not. I promise you it's not. It's going to end the way that the Bible has predicted for it to end. And as I have said before, and I'll say again, as the president is fixing to quit speaking on the coronavirus, the best that I can do, at this point in time, at this juncture in my life, because I still don't have supporters. I still don't have a congregation per se. The best that I can do is pray to God that if they themselves will not be tormented in the flesh in this world, that maybe it will fall upon to their children or their children's children or possibly even their children towards unleashing the wrath of God upon to their genealogy because of what that they have done here. That's the best that I can do. And there's nobody that can stop me from me believing that. There's nobody that can stop me from me hoping that. And I'm not hoping that because of what that they have actually done to me. Once more, it's never been about me. But what that they have done to my purpose. They was dedicated from day one over in Kenton, Tennessee, of wanting to stop my purpose. I worked with a family for over a year, reading Scripture every day, understanding, interpreting Bible, Scripture every day. And they had the opportunity that they could have mentored me. They could have put me under their wing. They could have said, Jubby, we understand that your life was spared, and this is where you believe that God has placed you, and this is your purpose, and we're going to help you. We're going to support you. We're going to help you meet your destiny that God wanted you to meet. Once more, I didn't fail that family over there. That family over there failed me. And most importantly, that family over there didn't just fail me. They failed God who anointed me. Because it was the same God that they supposedly speak in 1,000 different tongues towards believing in. All these tongue talkers. Yep. The tongue talkers has helped to put us where we are right now as a society, in addition to corrupt politicians, and in addition to the phonies and the balonies, and all the lukewarm, fence-straddling people. And that's the reason why I spent so much emphasis upon understanding what happened with Davy Crockett and what happened to the society during the time that Davy Crockett was living, is that it wasn't that Davy Crockett failed the community towards going down to Texas and fighting in the Alamo and dying, basically sacrificing himself for the people, for democracy. It wasn't that Davy Crockett failed the communities around here. It was the communities failed Davy Crockett. And the same characteristics that fell upon in the era of Davy Crockett has now fell upon my life too as well. I put out a memo not too long ago about Davy Crockett. That the things that Davy Crockett tried to achieve in his life never got achieved. But the things that Davy Crockett achieved in his death exceeded anything that Davy Crockett could have ever imagined in achieving. And I'm sure that's where they want to place me. They want to place me in society as me being some sort of, oh, he's gone now. Oh, we'll memorialize him like we did Martin Luther King. Or we'll memorialize him like we did other people, other preachers that sacrificed this, and other great movements and other great... You know, I don't need that. Just like my grandmother used to always preach to us boys, if you can't do the right thing while I'm living, don't try to put on a happy, smiley face and pretending that you're going to do the right thing in my death or during my death. Because you're only showing your own ignorance. She used the words flowers to express her feelings. That if you can't send me flowers while I'm living, don't send me none whenever I'm dead. And she meant every word of it. Lucille Jordan, that lived over in Kenton all her life. All her life. Never moved from the area, in the Obion, Tennessee area. And you'll find people to this day, older people, just like her, that was born, reared up, and to this day, still lives in the same remaining area. I'm going to end this with whatever the president's got to say. Good luck to all of us pertaining to this coronavirus and all the other illnesses and sicknesses that has fallen upon to not only the American people but the world. I appreciate your time. I appreciate people allowing for me to be able to post what I need to post out to the general public because of the inadequacies that's happened throughout the past 30, 35 years. I just pray that we as a society will turn from our sinful and wicked ways, and that the sicknesses and the bad things that are occurring will one day have a turnaround to the point that we will see a great revival. We will see peace and utopia. We will see the covenant of God manifest itself, even though we've got individuals that has tried so desperately not to see the will of God manifest itself. But I just pray to God that eventually we will see the manifestation of God's holy will be done before the end of time and before the opening of, yes, that second seal, which is that red horse pertaining to the two witnesses. Thank you. Good luck to all of us.
That in New York. One final question. Go ahead.
Travel Washington State. Anticipate troops will be returning. You said, how soon do you see them returning in this U.S.-Taliban agreement? How soon do you expect troops to be coming back?
Today. Okay? Today. They'll start immediately. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be doing this quite often. We're going to keep you abreast of all of the facts. And again, I want to thank the professionals. They are great professionals. I've gotten to really know them and see them under very interesting and tough and trying conditions. We have the finest in the world. I will say this, other countries call us and they ask, would it be possible for them to speak to Anthony and Bob and the people that you're talking to on a daily basis now. So we're going to be very transparent. We'll be meeting you probably tomorrow, the next day. We'll keep you abreast. Thank you very much.
The president, the vice president, among others, wrapping up about a 45-minute long news conference. A rare news conference and a very rare news conference on a Saturday, mostly to update on the coronavirus and what is being done and what has happened here in the United States. We're going to listen to the head of the CDC.
Mr. Secretary.
The risk is low. I encourage Americans to go about their life. That includes travel to California, Oregon, and state of Washington. And we will continue to have aggressive public health response with our state and local territorial health departments to get a better understanding of these community cases that we've now begun to see.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, wrapping up, which sort of wraps up the entire news conference, which was stay calm, we've got this under control, and that while the coronavirus has certainly scared a lot of people, and there's been a lot of concern around the country, some would say panic around the country, everybody can relax, and in the words of sort of the America's health officials, we got this. And we're the experts in this. Healthy people will recover, the president said. One of the biggest pieces of news out of this was about the one American who has died in Washington State. And we learned what had been suspected about the coronavirus is that it is extraordinarily more dangerous for those who are older. And we understand this person was in their 50s and with underlying health problems, which this person also had.
Yeah.
Which plays into this idea that the coronavirus is not some massive health threat in the United States.
Well, and everybody else at that press conference.
Yet, we hope.
Also sending our condolences to that person's family. The other big news that came out of this press conference were new travel restrictions.
Right.
The Trump administration had already imposed these travel restrictions against China at the beginning of the outbreak, but now the vice president said that at this meeting this morning with the coronavirus task force, they presented President Trump with a range of options, and he ended up settling on imposing a ban on any foreign national who has visited Iran over the last 14 days, and he's also increasing the travel advisory warning to its highest level, a level 4, to 2 countries that have sustained pretty big outbreaks in their countries, Italy and South Korea. South Korea has over 3,000 confirmed cases. Italy has about 900. So those are just restrictions that have been elevated, not, he's not banning anybody from going there, but a level 4 is pretty significant. And then, of course, he also said that he was considering, or at least looking at possibly imposing travel restrictions
on the southern border as well.
Yes, clearly leaving a lot of options open. You might say it's been a bad week in the markets because of fears over the coronavirus and some economic shocks. The president addressed a number of those, saying the markets are strong. When we come back, one of our Wall Street experts breaks down whether or not it's enough, and that press conference was enough to protect your 401k. See you on the other side of the break.
And of course, let's not forget, in the press conference, Mr. Trump reiterized to verify the statement that he made yesterday, late yesterday night, in regards to the South Carolinians, the great state of South Carolina, of the word hoax was to be primarily used upon to the tactics that he believes that the Democrats are using against him in regards towards Donald J. Trump believing that the Russian investigation was a hoax, and indicating from Donald Trump that the Ukrainian investigation was a hoax. So Donald Trump was talking about primarily their tactics rather than talking about the actual disease of the coronavirus. So let's be sure and get that straight and get that out to the people in clarification purposes. That way we'll know not to put out no more hoax coronavirus outbreak adventures that could be possibly misleading to the people, that Donald Trump is basically asking the people, rather than to divert around the volcano, to actually walk off into the volcano. I actually used that as an analogy this morning in some of my material that I was putting out to my viewers. I used the volcano analogy because of previous cultures back years ago, whenever they would do various sacrifices, various tribes thought that that was the only way that they was going to be able to calm. I think you can go back to the original Godzilla movie, that was going to be the only way that they was going to be able to calm the volcano, was to have a human sacrifice towards throwing the human sacrifice off into the volcano. And I've heard other people say, oh, so you just expect for me to walk off into the mouth of the volcano. So I was going extreme with my analogy, but I think it must have gotten somebody's attention out there because of the criticism being thrown at the president a while ago in the regards towards people misidentifying what his true intent was whenever he made the statement about the hoax. So we have helped to clear that up too as well. Good luck to all of us, and shalom. Thanks for listening.